If you want talk, games, and fun all rolled into one, well, you've come to the right place. This is The Game Show, where host Bradley Clarke and his special guests talk about the world of television game and competition shows. But Bradley's guests aren't here to just talk. They came to play a game as well. What will today's topic be? What game does Bradley have planned? There's only one way to find out.
It's time to start the show.
You heard the man. Welcome to The Game Show. And here's your host, the Bradster himself, Bradley Clarke.
Just like the Temptations sang, get ready, 'cause here I come. Thank you so much, Austin Angelo, and welcome everybody to another exciting episode of The Game Show, the talk show, all about the world of television game and competition shows. I'm Bradley Clarke, the Bradster, and if you're a fan of early to mid 2000s primetime game shows, well, this is the episode for you, because my guest today is a game show producer that worked on a few of the most well-known game shows that came out of that period. And I'm so excited to chat with him about these game shows. So would you like to know which primetime game shows my guest worked on during the early to mid 2000s? Of course you do. Well, these are them.
Here are the 8 contestants who will take part in tonight's show. One of them will walk away with up to $1 million. The rest will leave with nothing. As round by round, they're voted off as the weakest link.
Welcome to the weakest link. Any of the 8 people in the studio here tonight could win up to $1 million. They don't know each other, however. If they want the money, they'll have to work as a team. But 7 of them will leave with nothing, as round by round we eliminate the player voted the weakest link. Let's meet the team.
This paddle wheel is going to take someone down tonight on Dog Eat Dog. Hello and welcome to Dog Eat Dog. Any of our contestants could leave the studio tonight with $25,000. But to do so, they must exploit everything they know about their opponents. To give our players the chance to size each other up, we sent them away to a training camp where we tested their physical, mental, and social skills. Think of it as getting to know your enemies, or at least what they've chosen to reveal.
Tonight from Hollywood, a television event like no other. 6 celebrities face off on the greatest game shows of all time. Movie star Leslie Nielsen, Trading Spaces Paige Davis, NSYNC's Lance Bass, actress Kathy Najimy, Saturday Night Live's Tim Meadows, and Baywatch babe Brandy Roderick. All on Gameshow Marathon. Over the next 7 episodes, the stars compete in 7 classic game shows. In the finale, our celebrity grand champion will win $100,000 for their favorite charity. Plus, there are over $1 million in cash and prizes at stake. And you at home can win it all. Tonight, we kick off our tournament with the classic game show, The Price is Right. And for one night only, host Ricky Lake will step into the shoes of the legendary Bob Barker.
Bob, I hope to do you proud. Get ready. This is Gameshow Marathon.
Our survey said... We'll show you what's behind door number 2 right now. Come on down! Keys, go low! Go low! Game of the magazine. Charles, a virgin ass.
From CBS Television City in Hollywood, this is Game Show Marathon. And now, here's your host, Ricky Lake.
Hi, everybody! Thank you. Tonight we celebrate the most exciting time-tested shows ever on TV. Game shows. We picked 7 game shows of all time, and we'll be bringing you a different one every episode.
But this man's career did not stop in 2006. In fact, one of his most recent executive producing credits is a result of reviving one of the game shows you just heard.
Welcome to The Weakest Link. 8 contestants compete to win up to $1 million. They'll vote each other off,
Ariel.
one by one, round by round, as the weakest link. Oh, and did I mention the $1 million prize on the line? What African-American astrophysicist is the director of the Hayden Planetarium?
Einstein.
So we're going with these 8? Is that right?
Yes, he is one of the executive producers of both the Ann Robinson-hosted Weakest Link and the revival of Weakest Link, hosted by Jane Lynch. He is also the executive producer of the competition game show Dog Eat Dog and the CBS special series Gameshow Marathon. He knows Elon Musk is not a clone, he doesn't get stuck in revolving doors, and he is definitely not one fry short of a Happy Meal. He is game show producer Stuart Krasnow. Stuart, welcome to the game show.
Hey, thanks. I love that intro. It's awesome.
It is such a pleasure to have you on the game show today. And I know during our chats before the show, you mentioned how you felt old when I told you I still have fond memories of watching Gameshow Marathon as a 9-year-old boy. So I do apologize if during our conversation I make you feel a bit old, because if you must know, I was only 3 years old when Weakest Link first premiered here in America.
No, it did not. That's so crazy. Well, I was so young when I produced it, Bradley, that it's all good with me.
Excellent. And speaking of producing, I want to start off by giving a shout out to a friend of both yours and mine, game show producer and 2-time guest on the game show, Aaron Solomon, for connecting us and making this conversation possible. So thank you so much, Aaron.
Aaron is awesome. I've worked with him many times, and most recently on the latest revival of The Weakest Link, and it's just a pleasure to be in his presence. He is a true game show purist and authority. And game shows are about rules, and there are a lot of new people who sometimes come into game shows and aren't comfortable with that piece of it. And the rules are your friends. They're not your enemies in a game show. They help guide you, and Aaron knows that, which is great.
Oh, believe me, every time a new game show comes on, I make sure to memorize all of the rules by episode 2.
Right. The structure of a game show really is you're building that maze, but then you want people to run free in it, but they also have to run free with the same set of boundaries, obviously, to have a sense of fairness, right?
Absolutely, and especially now with social media, because if something doesn't seem fair to the at-home audience, they could easily let you know their opinion with the tap of a button.
Yes, I appreciate the extra policing. You know, in the old days, people probably wrote letters complaining and things to their local newspaper or something. Who knows how they did it then? We would get every now and then viewer comments on your online chats, I'd say, you know, maybe in my earlier iterations of shows. But I don't mind the social media call outs. I think they keep us on point. And I think everyone should be empowered to have a voice. And the fact that you can tweet something or make a TikTok about something that didn't feel or look right creates a conversation about a show. And I think that's all fair, especially in a broadcasted show. You're responsible to the whole public. That's the whole idea. Everyone's supposed to be able to watch it, and everyone should be able to comment on it, and everybody should be able to police it. I'm all good with all that.
Plus, whether the comments are good or bad, it highlights the show and might get more people to watch.
Right? Exactly.
So we are going to talk about all of the game shows that I just mentioned during your introduction, as I have plenty of questions and curiosities for them. And then later on, Stuart, I am going to give you the chance to avoid going down the walk of shame as you test your game show knowledge during the Game of the Day segment.
Got it. All right.
So, Stuart, are you ready to chat about game shows with me?
Yes, Bradley, yes.
Then let's get into it. So I like to start off by asking many of my guests this first question, which is, when did your love for game shows first begin? And what were some of your favorite game shows to watch at the time?
I grew up with, this will give my age away. See, we're back to that topic. So many of the shows that were recently revived on ABC are shows that I really grew up with. The Match Game, Press Your Luck, PBS brought back Joker's Wild. I loved Wizard of Oz, which was the original Alex Trebek vehicle. That was actually one of my favorites.
What are the odds that you know the intimate secrets of your favorite stars? What will the average man reveal when he unbuttons his shirt? What are the odds that you kiss and tell more than the average girl, LeVon? If you know the answers to any of these questions, the odds are you can win up to $10,000 in cash and merchandise playing the Wizard of Oz. And now here's the wily wizard himself, Alex Trebek.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
There was one with riddles I used to watch.
That show was Jackpot.
Jackpot. I love Jackpot. I love Treasure Hunt. I watch them all. And I would say probably from first and second grade on, I like the ones where you had to pick something because I think I have a little piece of me that feels like I'm a little bit psychic and witchy about stuff like that. But then I also love the ones where there was knowledge involved. And I think so many of us who grew up loving game shows got really good at knowing a lot about a lot of different things, or maybe a little bit about a lot of different things. And I think that knowledge is fun knowledge to have.
Knowing the Wizard of Oz is Alex Trebek's first game show hosted in America is definitely fun knowledge to have, since many people don't know that fact.
Oh, I love the Wizard of Oz. I actually think Jeopardy James would be a great host of that if they were to revive that one, because it was really about odds, and he's as much about odds as he is about trivia, right? So I think he'd actually be a good vehicle for him, honestly.
I agree 100%. Now, Stuart, was working in the television industry always the career goal you were hoping to achieve?
It definitely was. It got more and more real as I got older. And then by the time I got to college, I just totally knew that this was it. At first, I started a little bit in front of the scenes, and then I realized I really enjoyed being behind the scenes. So I think television was always a calling for me in many ways. I really liked the idea of going into news at first. I also want to be on air for a minute. And I think I quickly realized that my thrill and my adrenaline rush came from just hearing that countdown. Even when you count down for me to be on this podcast today, you just feel an adrenaline rush. I love it. I'm on. This is my element. This is where I belong. And I always said, if I ever don't have that excited feeling on a set, that's when I'm going to stop doing it. And to this day, I could be doing my 150th show, and I'm just like, the moment we're rolling, I'm alive in a whole different way.
And I know you started out working on a lot of talk shows. You worked on Late Night with David Letterman, The Joan Rivers Show, and the short-lived Martin Short Show. But when did you decide to focus your career attention on game shows?
One of the greatest things about being able to look back now, nobody really chooses their journey. I'm a little bit odd. I don't believe in goals. I believe in dreams. And there is a difference. I think goals are not always in your control professionally. You don't always know where you're going to land. You don't always have control of where you're going to be promoted, or who's going to react well to you and take care of you and who's not. So I like dreams. So I always had the dream of doing game shows, but I kept falling into other spaces that I really enjoyed. First news, then talk. And then I started to have opportunities to do game shows once I was in Los Angeles. And then I was like, okay, I did a dating game pilot when I was in New York, but New York just wasn't a center for game shows anymore. So I kept finding myself going to talk shows, but I think I always wanted to do game in the back of my head. But the real common denominator, real people in a situation where you don't know what's going to happen. I look at it like a football game. You know, you have a play, you have a plan, but once the ball's in the air, you don't know what's going to happen. I always love that about game shows, and I always love that about talk shows. You know, as much as you want to produce people, real people are always going to do something, or citizens, or whatever you want to call them. In the UK, they call them punters, are always going to give you something you never could have written. And that's what I love. I really enjoy people. I enjoy the cast members on my reality shows. I enjoy guests on my talk shows. And I always enjoy contestants on game shows.
So let's talk about your big introduction to the game show world, and that is with Weakest Link, which first debuted in America on NBC with host Ann Robinson on April 16th, 2001. However, it originally premiered in England on the BBC on August 14th, 2000. Brad fact: when The Weakest Link first debuted in England, it was just a daytime quiz show. So Stuart, when did you first hear about the show and know that you wanted to be involved with bringing the show to America?
It was Jeff Zucker, who was the president of NBC's third day at NBC. And he didn't really know a lot of people at NBC. I had worked with him at the Today Show in New York. And he said, just come in here and I just want to show you something. And he showed me the pilot. And I said, oh, I could do this show in 2 seconds. And the host on the pilot was, do you know who it was?
You know what? I don't. You stumped me on that one, Stuart. Who was it?
Richard Hatch.
Really?
Yes. Richard Hatch was sent to do a pilot with a development group. And he did it all with expats living in London. So they had American contestants on the stage of the London version of the show. And Jeff looked at that tape, and he also looked at the original tape. And then he looked again, and he said, well, why don't we just use her? Why are we using Richard Hatch? And so everyone in the room, of course, is the brand new president of a network. And whatever the brand new president of a network says, trust me, everyone's going to be nodding their head around them, whatever they say. And it happened to be a really good suggestion. And everyone nodded their head yes. And we went to the negotiations, and we made the deal with Ann Robinson and then Phil Gurn and myself. Phil had done 21 for NBC, and I had a deal with the network. So I met with several producers to partner with. I chose Phil. I just felt he would be the perfect match for the show and for me. And we went over and spent a week observing the show in England.
I'm going to bring this up again later, but it's interesting that Richard Hatch hosted a pilot for the American version of Weakest Link because he would later appear as a contestant on a special Survivor Castaways edition of The Weakest Link here in America. Brad fact.
Yes, I had actually had a friendship with Richard as well at the time, and there weren't that many reality producers, so we pretty much met with anybody who popped on air. We'd be like, oh, this person's somebody. I was not part of the decision to have Richard Hatch be chosen. That was before I was involved. But I will tell you that I think the thought was they needed somebody who was going to have permission to be mean because it was an anti-game show. This was not the game show where you have somebody who's wonderful, my favorite, Wink Martindale, making people feel good and pumping them up. This was about bringing them down and making them feel really bad and really almost stupid about the wrong answer. And Ann was just so mean and could really put a knife through somebody. I think the thought was somebody like Richard Hatch had that permission with the American audience too. The difference is some shows, it's just that's the person who is supposed to do it. And Ann was the right person.
There was a documentary made for the BBC called Ann Robinson Goes to America, which chronicles the process of how the Weakest Link came to America. And you were featured in that documentary attending a taping of the Weakest Link in England with Phil Gurin. Before we talk about that experience, I do want to ask you, at the beginning of the documentary, Jeff Zucker, who you just mentioned as the new president of NBC Entertainment at the time, said of The Weakest Link, "It's a good game, but I think what makes it a really fun, great game is Ann Robinson. Without Ann Robinson, I'm not sure it would work in the United States."
So far, the show has been bought by 34 countries, but by far the most interesting development was when giant American corporation NBC took it. And it wasn't just the show they were after.
It's a good game, but I think what makes it a really fun, great game is Ann Robinson. Without Ann Robinson, I'm not sure that it would work in the United States.
It's the 27th of February, and a team of Americans have flown in from Los Angeles. Leading from the front are NBC executive producers Phil Gurin and Stuart Krasnow. They've never met Ann before, and will be working with her on a daily basis in America, so it's important that they get on well.
One of the aspects of American game shows I personally think is disappointing, especially now, is that we make the hosts sell the game and not the game format sell the game. In other words, celebrities are chosen as hosts because they have a following and people will watch. But the game format is not highlighted as the main reason viewers should tune in. So despite Ann Robinson not being known in America, she was going to have a big publicity campaign so that the American audience can learn about her demeaning shtick as a host, and hopefully people would tune in for that purpose. So Stuart, do you think The Weakest Link would have initially been brought to America and been viewed as an enticing quiz show for the American audience had Ann Robinson not agreed to host the show here?
No, and I think Jeff is right about that. And I think it was all within the timing, right? And it was very funny because Ann and I became very close very quickly. And she called me with delight one day and she said, "I've been mean to everybody in this city." Because she was in New York City doing a promotional tour for us. And we were going to be premiering with 3 shows, 3 nights in a row, because Millionaire at that time was on 4 nights on ABC and killing it. So the idea was we were going to go 3 nights a week. And we had our shows in the can barely. And Ann called me and she said, "I was mean when I checked into the hotel. I was mean to the cab driver." I was like, "You're taking this character thing a little too far." Well, how wrong was I when the next day she was host from hell, cover of the New York Post, and basically reiterating all the stories of all these people who had just terrible experiences with her. So she loved being able to come here, take the country by storm, and own this really mean person, which she actually obviously was not. But people really believed how mean she was, and it was really a good thing for us at that time. When you looked at Rosie O'Donnell's show, people say, "Oh my God, she was the queen of nice," right? And then over time, she sort of became known as somebody who had a kind of an edgy side to her, to say the least, right? I think when people are on TV, they can show one side of themselves. Part of Ann was a tough, hard-hitting journalist, and she was known for that in the UK. So in a weird way, it didn't seem like a big stretch for the UK audience to see her be tough on people because they were used to that tough and that brutal honesty. But I think there were critics who were very concerned, like, it's such a mean tone. This show is too mean. Is this going to play well in America? And I worked for many years for Mike Darnell over at Alternative over at Warner Brothers or Warner Media or Discovery Plus or whatever you call it now. And one thing that Mike always believed, and I did many shows with him over the years, we always had British hosts. He felt that a British person, because of their accent, had permission to be meaner than an American. That British accent is so disarming and so charming that they can say, all the brides jump into that pile of manure and find your wedding ring. That British accent has an elevated feel to it, so they can say things elegantly that are not necessarily elegant, if that makes sense.
In England, the top prize for the weakest link was not £1 million, but rather £10,000 for the daytime version and £20,000, which later increased to £50,000 for the primetime version. Brad fact. However, NBC decided to make the top prize here in America $1 million. So because of the $1 million game show boom that was happening at the time, which included Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, do you think NBC was pressured to make the top prize for Weakest Link $1 million because anything less might seem like the show is being cheap?
You know, it's funny. I didn't really think that much about it. I think the standard here at that time pretty much was $1 million. The $1 million prize was kind of something people just put out there all the time. And then we started adjusting and realizing for certain shows, you know, like for Fear Factor, I wasn't the development on that show, but I was part of the conversations. And one of the things that we all realized at a certain point was getting $50,000 for a day in your life, or for the viewer an hour of TV of watching somebody do 3 things, is a good payout. So I think, though, the quiz shows have been stuck in this $1 million range for a long time, or the potential prize of $1 million. And Millionaire was the game changer. I don't think anybody was putting on a game show anytime, anywhere in those days that wasn't going to give $1 million or even more potential prize. The drama of somebody becoming a millionaire for going on TV was, at that time, a very big concept.
The Ann Robinson publicity campaign was a really big process, as lots of time and money went into photo shoots and filming commercials. There was even a commercial in which the voiceover said, "The show that blew away Millionaire in England," which technically wasn't true, since The Weakest Link didn't first go head-to-head with Millionaire until the fall of 2001, and actually lost in viewership to Millionaire. Brad fact.
Goodbye. The show that blew away Millionaire in England is coming to NBC. The Weakest Link, NBC in 3 weeks.
So Stuart, as one of the executive producers, was there a lot of pressure on you to make sure that the American audience doesn't view Weakest Link as NBC's Millionaire wannabe? And was one of the goals to hype up the show to be more exciting than Millionaire?
Yes. NBC at that time was playing catch up. When Jeff Zucker came in, we almost had no reality shows. Again, myself and Matt Kunitz were there under reality deals, and we were developing reality shows and doing reality shows. But Survivor was a big hit. Millionaire was a big hit. So NBC was sort of last to the party. Fox was on with tons of stuff. So we were all playing catch up. So I'm sure they want to jump on that bandwagon, and think how it sounded on paper. It was a quiz show from England, and we were going to make it $1 million prize, and it was a big hit in England. And everything was in a circle. You know, it had that dramatic kind of feel, and that big set, which was very new, that blue and steel and glass set that Millionaire had, the sort of version of that too. So I think there was sort of, we're bringing the sister cousin over. I think that was definitely part of the sale, and probably the reason they bought it. And it was its own show. There was actually an interesting backstory. I'm going to see if I can say things that Bradley doesn't know, because that makes me really happy. When we met with the original development team, Phil Gurn and I, in England, an orthopedist had actually come up with the show, and it was originally brought in as survival of the fittest. And the idea is that it was sort of a play on evolution, if you will, you know, by the voting off. You didn't have to be the smartest person in the room to win this game. You had to be strategically the one who's best at surviving. So it's really Survivor meets a game show, if you will. And I believe that orthopedist gets a royalty to this day for every episode that airs. His deal was very interesting. He had no creative input, but I think he got like $1,000 credit anytime the show aired anywhere in the world. Albeit to say, I bet he made more money from The Weakest Link than he did as an orthopedic surgeon. It's pretty cool.
I did not know that story, so thank you so much for teaching me that fact. And something else I've always wanted to know is, for the American version, why was the official title changed from The Weakest Link to just Weakest Link, despite the early commercials saying the title was The Weakest Link, and Ann Robinson introducing every episode by saying the phrase, "Welcome to The Weakest Link."
Welcome to The Weakest Link.
This is so funny because I've been on network deals. I've also been an executive, and I've also been a showrunner and producer. And this show, like some other shows I've worked on in the past, the argument is so fascinating. I didn't remember the name change at all. But when we started to talk about this new one coming back, the conversation came in all over again. And then they just went with Weakest Link. I think the honest answer is it has to do with the way the guide used to list things when you search them or something. I think it's about the searches. And I think that's why they make that argument. Especially when the original came out, I think that was a big time when this thing TiVo had just started, so I think it was really more about that than anything else.
And one of the changes made to the actual game was, on the British version, the first round is started by the contestant whose name is first alphabetically. But on the American version, the first round is started by the contestant standing behind the first position podium. So Stuart, was there an important reason behind this change of which contestant started the first round?
Yes. The broadcasting standards in America is far stricter than that in England. England could get away with a lot of kinds of rules that we have, but the broadcast and standards lawyers that we had on this show, both times around, agreed that the rule should be that the podium should be chosen randomly. And the more randomization you have, the less ability you have to fix a game show. And of course, nobody fixes a game show anymore unless they want to go to jail. So the more things you can do in that position to protect yourself, the better. So literally before the show, the contestants all pick a card, ace through 8. I believe that they do it with playing cards. This is an Aaron question. I'm not in the room for that. I believe that's what they use, or just pick numbers out of a hat. And that's how they get their podium designations. So that way, the people who wrote the questions can never know in advance who's getting the first question. There is a possible world, and this is where things get so technical, but you asked Bradley, like if they did it the English way, the lawyers here and the broadcast standards people here believe that if you know that this woman, Amy, is going to get the first question, does that make a producer or a writer want to make sure that Amy gets the baking question because she's a baking champion? It protects us from ourselves to have more randomization. So that's really what happened. I don't know the order until they land on the stage. I'm like, oh, that's how it ended up. That's interesting. And it's kind of a nice surprise for me. And then I'm opening up the question stack. So there's no way to know who's getting what question. And then as the eliminations go, that's also a built-in piece of the puzzle too, because now you really don't know who's getting what question. So it really is to keep the questions and who's getting the question to be a mystery until the very last moment. That's the real purpose of it.
I've always been interested in how game show money ladders are created, and I love studying the differences between game show money ladders from various shows. So the next question I have is in regards to the American Weakest Link money ladder. I always thought that the original British Weakest Link money ladder was perfectly crafted for the game in that each step was well proportioned to the 1,000 pound target in relation to the question number in the chain. However, for me, the amounts used for the American Weakest Link money ladder just consisted of standard American game show money ladder increments that did not sync up with the British money ladder proportions. So what was the thought process like when creating the original American Weakest Link money ladder?
I think what happened was when you changed the prize to $1 million, it changed the liability as well. We had moments where people run the chain, and it should be a rare moment. But that's where you get a statistician to work on it and give a pass so you can have a sense of where things are going to land and you just want to hit certain places within the show. But I do think that was all because it was $1 million top prize. I think the money ladder was back-timed into the idea that it had to be able to add up to $1 million in potential winnings. I would like to say there was some great secret sauce to it, but I'm not sure there really was.
You should have seen me in the 5th grade when GSM was airing reruns of Weakest Link. I distinctively remember during lunchtime taking a few sheets of paper and trying to craft the perfect Weakest Link money ladder just for fun.
I love it. You are a true game show nerd in the best way. I love it.
Oh, I am proud of that title, believe me.
I love it.
During the documentary, the voiceover said that it was February 27th when you attended a taping of The Weakest Link in England, but you were planning on going on the air with the show in April here in America. So by that time, was the set already being built and was contestant casting already underway? Or were you truly starting from scratch at that point?
We were from scratch. Casting had begun. We had started casting, but nothing else. And we had made a rendering of the set, but BBC had approval of all the renderings and everything we wanted to do. And we wanted to make some pretty drastic changes. I think Phil in particular had some really good ideas. And those things actually are kind of more in the new version now, like the exit tunnel, things like that. But when you have a show that's red hot and traveling the world, as you know, the keepers of that format do not want to stray too much. So I remember we really negotiated with the BBC. We wanted more of a primetime look. So they allowed us to have the telestrator podiums because those were flip cards in the UK. And they allowed us to have a bottom-lit floor, which in those days was not LED. It was fluorescent bulbs that were underneath a glass floor that when they burnt out or started blinking, we had to stop and change bulbs in the middle of a show. And of course, it would happen from time to time. But that bottom lit floor really gave it a primetime look. And I think the expectation with Millionaire, especially, we wanted to have that big, grand spectacle look that was the expectation of a network broadcast show at that time.
Although Weakest Link started out strong in the ratings, the viewership began to decline a few weeks in. So, in an attempt to boost ratings, you decided to use the classic game show strategy of producing celebrity episodes, in which celebrities played the game on behalf of their favorite charities. Some of these episodes included an NBC All-Stars special, a Soap Stars special, and a WWF Superstars special.
Here are the 8 NBC All-Stars who will take part in tonight's show. One of them will walk away with up to $1 million for their charity. The rest will leave, as round by round they're voted off as the weakest link.
Welcome to a special NBC All-Stars edition of The Weakest Link. Any of the 8 people in the studio here tonight could win up to $1 million for the charity of their choice. But if they want to win that money, they'll have to work as a team. However, only one of them will make it to the end, as round by round we eliminate the player voted the weakest link. Let's meet the team.
My name is Dennis Weaver. I was born in Joplin, Missouri. You may know me better as Sam McCloud on The McCloud Show. Also just finished writing my autobiography, All the World's a Stage, and I'm playing for the Institute of Economics.
Hi, I'm Erin Gray, and I was born in Honolulu, Hawaii. I starred in Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, Silver Spoons, and most recently, Profiler. And my charity is Haven House, which is a battered women's shelter, and the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
Ed Begley Jr. from Hollywood, California. Played 6 years as Victor Ehrlich on St. Elsewhere. Currently on Wednesdays, 9:30 on another channel. I'm playing for the Dream Foundation.
Hi, I'm Vicki Lawrence, and like Ed, I am a native of Los Angelean. What do you call us? Mama's Family first premiered on NBC, and I was Mama. And I am playing for the Miller Children's Hospital, located at the Long Beach Memorial Medical Center.
My name is Davy Jones. I'm from Manchester, England. I was on a show called The Monkees. I've written a number of books, my latest being Daydream Believin', davyjones.net. I'm going to be a grandfather in June, and I'm going to be playing for Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Hi, I'm Raven Simone. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. I was on The Cosby Show, and right now I'm working on a show that's going to be on the Disney Channel. I'm playing for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation.
Hello, my name is Nichelle Nichols. I hail from Chicago, Illinois, and my NBC show was Star Trek, and is still going strong. I am also being seen in a wonderful blockbuster movie called Snow Dogs as Cuba Gooding Jr.'s mother, and my new book, Saturn's Child, has just come out with its sequel, Saturnus Quest. I am playing for Support a Child International Foundation.
Hello, I'm Dirk Benedict. I was born, raised, and live in the great state of Montana. I was once upon a time in a show called The A-Team, and I will be playing for the Northwest Montana Veterans through the Community Services Fellowship in Kalispell, Montana.
NBC Monday, the WWF superstars face their worst nightmare.
Who needs to be smacked down?
Triple H, The Big Show, and Stephanie McMahon.
She did sleep with my father, that's why I voted her off.
A special WWF edition of Weakest Link, NBC Monday at 8, 7 Central.
Was this your idea to do the celebrity specials, or was it NBC's idea in an attempt to boost ratings?
It was all NBC's idea. I mean, I would say we came up with the ideas. We got the whole Brady Bunch cast on, which I thought was really an accomplishment back then. The idea was, this all came from promos. We did 82 episodes of Weakest Link in 11 months. If we had gone slower and not gone to that celebrity trick and only once a week, we probably could have been on for like 5 seasons. But, in those years, it was a real race to stay number one, especially for NBC. So they loved the show, but the promos people felt that the show just felt the same every time. And of course, it was airing more than once a week. And every now and then it just starts blending together. You know, they didn't want to see another lawyer, another school teacher, and another stay-at-home mom. It always seemed to feel to them the same after a while. So what they did was they asked us to do celebrity versions. So I don't know how many were celebrity versions, but I feel like we did a lot of them. And specialty versions and twins and comedians and you name it. Because this way, the idea was they could promote it, and they felt Anne was such a star. Seeing Anne go at it with different people would make it more viral, right? She's being mean to a known celebrity or going head to head with a known comedian. We actually did one that we did not air, which I will tell you about in a second. So I think that was the idea. Like, they'd be easier to promote if they looked different from one another. Now, those of us who watch game shows and love them, part of watching Jeopardy is that you're going to see 3 or 2 new people every night. But that time, the competition was too great.
What was the special episode that didn't air?
We did a kids version. And we knew going in, maybe we shouldn't be doing one with all kids. We had a shrink there, and we had a child psychologist, and we had a carnival out of our green room with popcorn and prizes and everything. So the kids would come out and everyone would cheer. And when they were eliminated, we didn't want anyone crying or anything. But it was just cringy. It just didn't feel right. So I don't think it ever aired. Because it was just Anne being mean to kids just felt like a little bit much.
And the top prize was still $1 million?
I don't remember, maybe $1 million in college tuition or whatever. There was always $1 million trust fund of some kind when you had kids on shows. Because they did kid versions on other shows too that had that prize. But the kid who won got the money. I remember that. But it was just uncomfortable. It just didn't feel right. It's just one of those funny moments where you look at each other and go like, maybe this wasn't a good idea.
Well, I know that 10 episodes of the original version of Weakest Link never ended up airing on NBC, but did the winning contestant from these episodes ever get paid?
I don't know for real what happens in that situation. Theoretically, they're not supposed to unless the show airs. But I think PR-wise, especially then when we really were a couple of cable stations and a couple of networks, I really think the PR value of not paying people wasn't worth it. That I think they pretty much just paid everybody out who had won and took it as a loss and left it at that.
On January 7th, 2002, a daily syndicated version of Weakest Link premiered with host George Gray. Brad fact, were you involved in any capacity with the syndicated Weakest Link?
I wasn't involved in syndicate. That was all Phil and Phil's company. What was interesting about that is there was a casting process for that as well. And I love George. I really do. But my first choice was very different. And I was in the booth during the casting. And there was somebody who I thought popped that I loved and wish had gotten the job. And that was Wanda Sykes. She tried out for the daytime version. And I said, wow. She was pretty new back then to the scene. And she was just so much fun. She is funny and brings a new quality to it. I love her voice. But I think then they went with a more traditional game show type. And George is great. He's very, very talented. I just thought Wanda was a more unusual choice, personally.
Were you surprised that the syndicated version went into production while the NBC version was still airing, instead of waiting for the primetime version to finish out its run?
No, because when you have a hit in those days, you just exploited it for everything that you could. And I think that's not necessarily very different from now either. And I think it's so hard to get something to work. I mean, I don't think people realize if the same failure rate existed in opening a restaurant or a different kind of business, I mean, there might not even be restaurants. No one would be able to afford to open one. So you have all these networks and all these content creators now, especially, who are willing to deficit things and get an idea on the air. But so few things make it and they're done. After 2-3 airings, they're not going to work. So when you have something that works, I think you start beating it with the stick and trying to get as many different incarnations out of it as you can.
As a huge fan of Survivor, I have to ask a question about the special Survivor episode that featured 6 of the castaways from the original Survivor season playing for charity.
One of these 6 people could win up to $1 million tonight. The rest will be cast away, as round by round they're voted off as the weakest link.
Welcome to a special edition of The Weakest Link. Any of the 6 people behind me could win up to $1 million for the charity of their choice. However, no man is an island. If they want to win the money, they'll have to work as a team. But 5 of them will not survive, as round by round, they vote off the weakest link. Let's meet the team.
Ramona, 30, Edison, New Jersey, chemist.
Gretchen, 39, Clarksville, Tennessee, mom.
Joel, 29, Green Bay, Wisconsin, health club consultant.
Sean, 31, New York City, neurologist.
Richard, 40, Newport, Rhode Island, motivational speaker.
Susan, 39, Palmyra, Wisconsin, truck driver.
This episode aired on May 10th, 2001, and it was the first primetime episode to be a half-hour long instead of an hour long. Brad fact. So was the Survivor primetime episode of Weakest Link a trial run for the half-hour syndicated format?
Nope. There was something, gosh, I want to say this was Jeff Zucker again, called supersizing the episodes. So when there was a special on the network or a show that they didn't want to premiere yet and they needed to buy more time, they would go to myself and Matt Kunitz usually and say, hey, we're doing something and we don't want to burn off an episode of Friends. Can you make a half-hour version of your show and make it a special thing? And maybe it could be the cast of Survivor. They literally dictated, can you do your entire show in a different time frame, which is a really hard thing to do. So it was just an accidental experiment and really was a time filler. Likewise, with my dating shows and stuff, I had a show Average Joe, and we had the crappiest little office, Matt and I, and we got a call from the network once that we had to supersize because something had fallen out from a Monday night lineup. And I supersized along with Andrew Glassman. We had to add a half hour of content to our episode of Average Joe. And Matt did the same with Fear Factor. And then Matt and I looked at each other and said, oh my God, the entire prime time of this network came out of this crappy office today. So it was actually very satisfying and very rewarding, actually, but it was funny.
And I'm presuming because Survivor aired on CBS and not NBC is the reason why the name of the TV show Survivor was not mentioned once throughout the entire episode, correct?
Boy, I didn't remember that. I'm sure that was the case. Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, the only time the name Survivor was ever mentioned throughout the entire episode was when Ann Robinson gave the answer to a question about the song Eye of the Tiger. Brad fact.
Oh, yes, we got it in there in a tricky way. Yeah, that's funny.
Ramona, which band recorded the hit song Eye of the Tiger for the movie Rocky III?
I don't know.
Survivor.
Next, let's talk about Dog Eat Dog, which aired on NBC for 2 seasons from June 17th, 2002 to August 26th, 2003. And just like Weakest Link, Dog Eat Dog originally started out as a game show in England. So Stuart, once Weakest Link was up and running, were you looking for another British game show that had the potential of becoming a success here in America?
Because the way my deal worked at NBC, they were looking and buying, and then they would bring in some of the producers who they had deals with to look at them first. So Jeff Gaspin was just hired to run Alternative at the network. I had also worked with him before in New York at NBC, in NBC News, actually. So when Jeff Gaspin came and said, I want you to look at this show, I looked at it. I loved the structure of it, but it was boring. But I said, this is a great structure. This 5 versus 1 thing, I love it. I mean, it's a little Squid Game-y.
Tonight, one of these 6 people could be winning £10,000. But to do so, they must eliminate all the others. It's Dog Eat Dog. And a very warm welcome to Dog Eat Dog. Well, there's £10,000 up for grabs tonight, but to win it, our contestants need to ruthlessly exploit what they know about each other. We sent them away for 24 hours of physical, mental and emotional team building. Of course, they won't have wanted to give too much away, so they also sat a set of formal tests designed to reveal to us who's most likely to fail each challenge. Think of it as getting to know the enemy.
And I was like, I really love the way the contestants have to kind of go after each other at the end. I love that they pick the person they think is going to fail. It had some of the Weakest Link things, but the problem with the English version, again, Matt Kunitz and I in that case was under the NBC deal as well. Because he had done Fear Factor. So the idea is let's stunt this up. Let's ratchet it up on steroids. So we went over to England to observe that show. The host, I forgot her name in England. She was going through some crazy scandal. There were like all these paparazzi outside the studio. It was crazy. She was a very well-known English host, and her husband cheated on her, and she was pregnant. It was crazy. So she was a mess. I remember that. And then we watched the show, and it's like people literally did math problems. They walked on a balance beam that was like 4 feet off the ground. I mean, it was really boring, but the structure was great. So we pretty much learned the structure, and we came back and I said, we're never going to be able to explain to Jeff Zucker and Jeff Gaspin why we need to do this show. So we got a great artist involved, a set designer, John Janis, and he made an incredible set rendering. It had a giant dog's mouth in it. It had a pool. It had these crazy stunts everywhere. It was a 40-foot tall stage, which Matt insisted on from his days at Fear Factory. Understood without height, you don't have drama. And we came up with a bunch of stunts, and we represented it to them, and then they bought onto it. But Jeff took one look at the drawing and said, I love this. Get rid of the dog's mouth. So the contestants were supposed to sit in a giant dog's mouth and giant teeth, but that never made it, but the rest of it did. And we leaned into the physical. We had some mental challenges, but they were playing hangman upside down, and we had stripped games, which we got in a lot of trouble for. But it was fun.
Ulrika Johnson was the host of Dog Eat Dog in England. Brad fact.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, she was really going through a scandal. It was crazy. I do remember that.
So I actually wanted to talk about the stripped games that were played on the show. In season 1, Dog Eat Dog was famous for having strip challenges, including strip hangman, strip golf, and strip darts.
You guys need to get ready for a challenge that will test your vocabulary and your modesty. It's called Strip Hangman. We'll show you a group of blank spaces which will spell out a common word or phrase when the letters are revealed. Your job is to solve the puzzle. But each time you guess a letter that's not in the puzzle, you, gentlemen, owe me an article of clothing. It's time to choose the loser. Our next challenge is called Strip Golf. And to succeed, you'll have to be one accurate exhibitionist. All you have to do is sink a single putt on our Dog Eat Dog putting green, but each stroke will cost you an article of clothing. Somebody would rather keep their clubs in the bag. It's time to choose the loser. Our next challenge is called Strip Darts. And to beat it, you'll need to be accurate and unflappable. You'll be playing on our custom dartboard, trying to accumulate 30 points. But each new dart costs you an article of clothing. One of you will have to throw darts or show some parts. It's time to choose the loser.
However, you did not use any strip challenges in season 2, even though these challenges made for great TV moments. So Stuart, is the reason why you stopped using the strip challenges because a majority of the players didn't actually get naked during their challenge?
No, some people did get naked. They always got down to their underwear. There's 2 or 3 that got completely naked, which was fun. It was just so dramatic, though they would do all that. We loved those games, and we thought they were signature. But this group, they're still around, 1 Million Moms, wrote to all the advertisers and said that they were disgusted by the nudity, by the stripping. So little by little, the sales department started pushing back on us until we couldn't do strip challenges anymore. And the last thing anybody wants to deal with is a complaint from a sponsor. But here's the irony about it, Bradley, that was really upsetting. When you looked it up, the organization we did a deep dive on in those days, it was like 10,000 members. So 1 Million Moms was really 10,000 moms. To this day, they still try to do this with other shows. They're kind of pretty much universally ignored, but they're still only at like 25,000. I mean, they're not 1 million moms.
Plus, nowadays, you and I have both seen way worse things on TV than somebody simply getting naked.
Yes. If there really were 1 million moms, they'd be very busy. They would need 1 million moms just to police everything.
Brooke Burns was chosen to be the host, and now game show fans know her as the host of GSN's The Chase and GSN's Masterminds. But this was her first game show hosting opportunity. So what made you choose Brooke as the host of Dog Eat Dog?
We interviewed so many people, and when she came in, she was so bubbly, had so much energy. She was so beautiful, and we wanted to do a sexy show. We wanted a sexy host, and it all sort of just fit. She was so smart and so beautiful and so well-spoken. We're like, where did you come from? We were just absolutely enamored, both Matt and I. And we proposed to the network, and there weren't a lot of female game shows. That was a very rare thing still. And she was on Baywatch for so long. She was originally on Baywatch, and she'd been a model. She had no problem being in a bathing suit. And we thought, sometimes we're going to want our host to be in a bathing suit. So we better have somebody who actually looks good and feels comfortable being in one. And she had just done, I think, Battle of the Network Stars. And she was definitely one of those people who could totally find a bathing suit for some of our opens in the show. And then her stylist and her really worked on kind of a look and a feel for the show. And when the set felt so futuristic but medieval, they started giving her this sort of dominatrix kind of style of dress. The whole thing just seemed to fit together. It was just weird and cool, and it just worked. And she just owned it.
After explaining the challenge and before the contestants vote, Brooke would say the line, "It's time to choose the loser," which I always enjoyed hearing.
Our next challenge is a trivia game. It's called Celebrity Three-Way. It's a test of pop culture knowledge that'll tell us who knows Kurt Russell from Kurt Cobain. You'll have to be up to date on celebrity names to puzzle your way out of this one. It's time to choose the loser. Let's get started. Tonight's first challenge is a lot of fun. It's called Over and Under, and it's located in our tank. One of you is going to have to take a ride on our water wheel and go jumping for flags. Who here doesn't really know their way around? It's time to choose the loser. Ready for your first challenge?
Oh, yeah.
Let's find out what it is. It's called the Underwater Weight Walk, and it'll test your strength, balance, and lung capacity. We've put a beam down in the tank. You'll have to walk it within the time limit. But here's the catch. You'll be dragging 80 pounds with you all the way. Someone here can't pull their own weight. It's time to choose the loser.
So was Brooke the one who came up with this brilliant line, or was it somebody else?
You know, I don't really know. That's a great question. I don't know which one of us came up with it. I would love to give credit to whoever it is. I have no idea which one of us said it's time to choose the loser, but I think we had to come up with something because everyone wanted a different line and they had known from Weakest Link that worked. So I think the idea was to have a line, and the BBC didn't see this as a big successful show. So they really let us have a lot of leeway with this one.
I know this was not part of the British version, but were there ever any talks of giving a guaranteed amount of money, say $5,000 or $10,000, to the top dog on the episode, aside from the chance to win the $25,000 top prize? Because I get it's part of the game, but it did seem unfair that a contestant who might have completed a couple of crazy stunts prior and actually won the game could lose the $25,000 because of 5 simple trivia questions that are asked to the 5 losing contestants, and the top dog is not even given the option of answering the questions themselves.
We liked the all or nothing. We felt that the contestant at the end was advantaged in the sense that they didn't have to answer a question. They just had to do a good job of picking who was going to fail at questions. And I think for us, it was really, we love that all or nothing. We called it the money shot at the end, where you've got one person celebrating and 5 people bummed out, or 5 people celebrating and 1 person bummed out. We didn't want to go down the participation trophy situation there. Now, I did have a very funny thing happen. We had to reshoot something. It was really terrible. It was the last question. Our top dog chose somebody to answer it, and the person answered it. And before we could tell them that the answer wasn't accepted, they jumped into the pool in celebration of having won. And the problem was that the question that they answered was, who wrote the Hobbit series of books? And they said J.R. Tolkien. Now, J.R.R. Tolkien is a correct answer. Tolkien is a correct answer. But J.R. Tolkien is like saying Franklin G. Roosevelt. It's incorrect. So we had to stop down, explain that they hadn't won, dry off their clothes, get them back in position, and then they missed the question. It was pretty terrible. That was one of those really close calls, like, oh, and he just pre-celebrated. And not only was it an over-the-top celebration, it was one where the person got completely wet. And I'm like, oh, please help me here. And kind of getting everyone back and then having to explain it. And people, when they think they won and then you have to explain why they didn't, they're in shock, and it takes a moment for them to really realize, and they argue back a little bit. But I think in the end, they really understood, like, oh, that does kind of make sense. Yeah, that's true.
Next, I want to talk about another one of your executive producer credits, and that is for Gameshow Marathon, which is my all-time favorite game show special series.
Tonight from Hollywood, a television event like no other. 6 celebrities face off on the greatest game shows of all time. Movie star Leslie Nielsen, Trading Spaces Paige Davis, NSYNC's Lance Bass, actress Kathy Najimy, Saturday Night Live's Tim Meadows, and Baywatch babe Brandy Roderick, all on Game Show Marathon. Over the next 7 episodes, the stars compete in 7 classic game shows. In the finale, our celebrity grand champion will win $100,000 for their favorite charity. Plus, there are over $1 million in cash and prizes at stake, and you at home can win it all.
Game Show Marathon aired in 2006 on CBS, and I can still remember being in awe when I first witnessed the recreated sets. And as a young game showologist, you should have seen me in front of the TV comparing the differences between the original sets and the recreated ones. And I was probably most excited for the video packages of each game show that aired prior to the sets being revealed, because they included clips of each show that I had never seen before. And Stuart, I must have been the only 9-year-old in America anxious to find out if the Press Your Luck board was going to feature the $470 space, and curious to find out whether the Card Shark set was going to have a manual or electronic freeze bar. But that was me, and that series definitely made me fall in love with the game show genre even more than I was before. So thank you, Stuart, for producing Game Show Marathon.
It was such a tough show to do, and it was such a joy. I think one of the hardest things about it was that we had a very tight time frame. So every 48 hours, we had to completely switch the set. And the thing that made it tricky was the laws at the CBS Center at that time. You couldn't load anything in or out after midnight. That crew worked so hard. It was brutal. And they had to basically take those sets out and destroy them after. It was crazy. And I'm like, no. I mean, didn't you just want to have card sharks in your room or in your house or your apartment? It was kind of funny. The weird thing is that, at that time, Leslie Moonves was very much in control of the CBS network. And he really approved who was going to be in that cast and who wasn't. And there were some people there that he was friends with. Leslie Nielsen, he really wanted Leslie Nielsen in there, which was an interesting person to have in there for sure. But we couldn't have Burt Reynolds because we had Leslie Nielsen, and Burt Reynolds wanted to do it, which I thought it would have been better. So it's just so interesting, the dynamics that went on. And Lance Bass, to this day, he was in Let's Make a Deal dressed like a banana, and he still says to me, I hate that you made me put on that banana suit. So yeah, I still have some residual damage from that show.
I never knew Burt Reynolds wanted to be one of the contestants on Game Show Marathon. Imagine Burt Reynolds, one of the biggest movie stars in film history, playing a crazy stunt on Beat the Clock or saying big bucks, no whammies while playing Press Your Luck.
He loved game shows. He would have been one of his last really appearances, even though he died many, 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 many years later. But he didn't really do much for so long. He was really a rare person to see, but he loved games that much that he really wanted to do it. And then Les Moonves was like, no, it's going to be Leslie Nielsen. We're like, okay.
It's always a fun time for me when I get to talk about Game Show Marathon. And actually, back in 2020, I had your friends Graham Shaw and Chris Ahern on an episode of The Game Show as my special guests. And they told me the story of how you gave them an opportunity at Fremantle, which eventually led to them being consulting producers on Game Show Marathon. And by the way, Graham and Chris referred to you as the nicest, most generous person you'll run into in Hollywood.
Oh, well, that's really kind of them to say. I'm so grateful for what we get to do, and I'm so respectful of the people I get to work with. I love showing off people who do well underneath you, like Chris and Graham. I couldn't imagine doing that show without them. They lived it and breathed it, and they were like building their own Disneyland the whole time, honestly. But at the same time, they just were so good at everything and so good at teaching the games to the host, Ricky Lake. It was a lot to do. And Michael and Dwight were on that one, too. So a lot of future big game show producers were on it in their own right. But the nicest thing about this business, I think, is if you present yourself as like a good, decent person, all the rewards are built in. I just never understood the toxic work environment. And it's so prevalent for so long in this industry. And it's so nice to look back and go, okay, I was never that person. And so many people who were that person are no longer working anymore. And that was not the case. There were a lot of people who had these jobs and acted like jerks. And I always apologize for them. I'm like, you have the greatest opportunity. You get to have the most fun of anybody on the planet, and you're being mean to people. I never understood that. So I hate that at that time it may have been more rare than common, but I think it's becoming more common, which is great. The best thing is that there's so many people who are very much like-minded and probably far nicer than me that have done so well. And that is so great to see.
Keeping with the theme we've established with Weakest Link and Dog Eat Dog, Game Show Marathon was also a British import, as it originally started in England as Ant and Dec's Game Show Marathon. Brad fact! So Stuart, were Ant and Dec ever considered to become the hosts of the American version of Game Show Marathon?
I believe that Fremantle at the time, I think the head of Fremantle at the time very much wanted it to be Ant and Dec. And I agreed. Even though Ricky Lake's a really good, I love her. I mean, obviously I did her original show. Ant and Dec, it made so much sense for them to do that show. But CBS was very definitive. They wanted a certain thing. They wanted a female. They wanted somebody who they know that could host and learn all the games. They wanted one person, not two. So, you're the behest of the network. The reason Game Show Marathon was such a natural fit for Fremantle, where my deal was at the time, was obviously because they had so many formats that they wanted to brush off and show off. So I know that probably all the moments from Game Show Marathon helped to make their way into the sales tapes of Match Game being sold as is, Press Your Luck being sold as is, Card Sharks being sold as is, and not trying to mess with the original format. So I hope, and I don't know for sure, but I hope Game Show Marathon, if nothing else, helped convince the people over at ABC by seeing the game played in its original way with its retro sets that you don't have to do too much to it. And look how Family Feud just still plays. It's amazing. It is amazing. I mean, certain ones. Pyramid, of course, was not in that round, and that's a Sony show, but I love Pyramid. I didn't include that in the one I like to watch as a kid, but Pyramid's still my favorite show to watch.
We'll get to Betty White being a part of Match Game in a moment, but were there ever any talks of an iconic figure from each of the 7 game shows making a cameo appearance or being featured in some way during that show's episode?
Yes. On the first night, we had Price is Right, and I tried so hard to get Bob Barker to make an appearance on it. He was still on the daytime show, and I said, is there any way? And I pitched this whole thing. The celebrity was about to putt, and then I was like, wait. Let's see how it's done. And then I wanted like a Rolls Royce, like a Pimp My Ride, Snoop Dogg kind of entrance for him, and then come out of the back of the Rolls, and then putt, wave to the crowd, and leave, make one of his great comments. And he thought about it, and he very politely declined. So yeah, we did try to get cameos. I mean, certainly Match Game was the place to do it, though. That's the one that made the most sense.
Kathy Najimy, who was playing Match Game as a Game Show Marathon contestant, brought up the fact that Kathy Griffin was sitting in the Brett Summers seat, Bruce Valanche was sitting in the Charles Nelson Riley position, and Adrian Curry was sitting in the Elaine Joyce position.
Tonight, we bring back Match Game. Get ready to match the stars. George Foreman, Kathy Griffin, Bruce Valanche, Adrian Curry, Adam Carolla, and Betty White as we play the star-studded Big Money Match Game. And now, here's your host, Ricky Lake!
Welcome to Match Game. Hello, stars. Such a privilege to have you all here. Now let's meet our contestants. Hi, Ricky. All right, we have Kathy Najimy and Lance Bass.
Hi.
Looking beautiful as always, Kathy.
Thank you. You too, baby.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
A little bit about me? Well, I was born in 1933, and I've had a lot of work. No, I love games. I love game shows. You know what I'm noticing that's awesome is that Kathy's in the Brett Summers position, right? Smart, funny. And Adrian's in the Elaine Joyce position. And Bruce is in the
Charles Nelson Riley.
I love it. And
Well,
Betty is in the Betty position.
That's exactly right. That's, it's not a coincidence.
I gotta say, my wife and I did the Betty position last night. It was excellent.
Excellent. The Kama Sutra.
Excellent.
Was that the goal of Game Show Marathon Match Game? To find current celebrities that matched up with the personalities of the celebrities who originally sat in those seats?
Very perceptive. And I don't know if you've been able to talk to anybody who's brought back Match Game with Alec Baldwin. That actually is part of the formula. So certain people are supposed to be in certain positions because we talked to as many people as we could find who worked on the original shows when we were doing them. And that was part of the makeup. It's probably something that Chris and Graham knew, that the fun, flirty one is supposed to be the Adrian Curry seat, that you needed to have the real comedian to be in that third position. So there actually is a pattern to how that panel is supposed to play out. So we did match people to match that panel in the personality type. And Kathy Najimy was an amazing contestant. She just ran with it. Every day in the briefing, she said, yeah, I know you hate me because I'm winning everything. I'm like, I don't hate you. She was so good at everything.
As we both mentioned, the late, great Betty White reprised her role as a semi-regular Match Game panelist by sitting in the 6th seat for the Game Show Marathon Match Game revival.
Betty White, everyone, where do I begin? You were on this original show with Gene Rayburn. You are, of course, a semi-regular on Boston Legal.
Yeah.
And what's it like for you? Because you're really the only person here that was actually in that chair back in 1973.
Well, it's amazing. You're prettier than Gene Rayburn. I gotta tell you that for sure.
I should
But
hope
it's
so.
such fun. They even matched the carpet, which also matches George's tie.
Really? Which also matches my dress.
That's true.
Yeah. Was Gene Rayburn as crazy as we think he is?
Well, the beauty of Gene was he wasn't an MC. He was just as nuts as the rest of us, so there was really nobody in charge.
Really? I'll bet it was one big party, huh?
It was fun.
Oh, good.
I heard today when we came over here, I heard that everybody thought we drank during the meal breaks. We never did. We didn't have to. We came in.
Funny you should mention that, Betty. Kathy, is there something that you know that we don't?
Oh, this was just my intro card, Betty, because I think that this should be an intervention.
That's now. I'm talking about then.
So, Stuart, for a game show fan like yourself, what was it like working with a game show legend like Betty White?
She was flawless. Every time she gave you what you needed. I mean, she's just one of those rare people that just, come on, she grew up on it. She was a professional game show panelist for a very long time. I think she appeared in almost every Mark Goodson format there was. There were like 70 of them. And she just knew how to be a panelist. She knew how to be a game player. She knew how to be funny and still make it about the contestants. She just was a natural. She was part of the creation of that world and really set the tone for it. So I think it was effortless for her to walk into it. And especially when you think of her being married to Alan Ludden and her history at Password. I mean, she was almost a professional game show contestant more than anything else for a while. I remember when she was originally booked, there was a genuine excitement that she was doing it. It was really exciting.
I was so disappointed when Gameshow Marathon didn't come back for a second season. But were there ever any talks with CBS about Gameshow Marathon ever returning? Or was Gameshow Marathon always supposed to be a one-and-done series?
It was a one and done. I think it was a very expensive show to do at the time. I don't think game shows were the it thing yet. It's all timing. I think it was probably a little bit too early. I think there was a little bit of backlash, if I remember, about Ricky taking Bob Barker's role. Remember that even when Drew Carey started, there was a lot of backlash, anybody taking over for Bob Barker. And then we started on that. I don't think we set up Ricky for success in that regard, only in that way. I think she did a phenomenal job and she was flawless. But I think there were certain people that just didn't want to not see Bob Barker. I remember that being a thing among the game show fanatics for sure.
Well, speaking of a game show fanatic's opinion, besides the fact that Game Show Marathon never returned for a second season, the other main disappointment I found with Game Show Marathon was using The Price is Right and Family Feud as two of the 7 game shows featured as part of the Game Show Marathon lineup. Because those 2 game shows at the time were on the air and producing new episodes. And the whole point of Game Show Marathon was to bring back classic game shows that have not been on the air for a while. So, Stuart, why was it ultimately decided to include The Price is Right and Family Feud as part of the Game Show Marathon lineup?
I think the idea was they wanted to use some tentpoles that people still knew and were familiar with. Was primetime Price is Right on yet? Did they do a few yet?
Yeah, there had been a few $1 million spectaculars by that point.
Right. So they were already toying with that. And I think they were already trying to sell Family Feud into primetime. So I think for Fremantle, let's brush off some old ones. Let's put in some that people haven't seen in a long time. And then also let's include some that people are familiar with. And I think it was really just like a best of. I think the idea was to give them a boost, actually, and remind people that Family Feud is out there. Family Feud at that time was not hosted by Steve Harvey yet. Family Feud needed a little bit of a zhuzh. The fun thing about doing Family Feud, though, was that we got to do it the old way with the people doing the fake portraits as a family, and then the piece would slide back and the family would come running out to the music. That was really fun to do.
Tonight, it's Family Feud! It's time for the Family Feud. Introducing the Najimy family. Kathy, Dan, Alexandra, Tom, and Mona ready for action. Playing against the Roderick family. Brandy, Debbie, Walter, Jason, and Betty. On your marks, let's start the Family Feud. And now, here's your host, Ricky Lake.
Welcome to Family Feud. We have got 2 great families ready to duke it out for a chance to win some cash for our lucky home viewer. The first team to reach 300 points will be our champions and go on to play fast money for up to $50,000 for someone watching at home.
Now let's jump ahead to the year 2020 and talk about the revival of Weakest Link. So Stuart, was the ultimate reason behind bringing back Weakest Link the fact that ABC brought back Millionaire in primetime and it did well, so NBC decided to compete by bringing back their early 2000s $1 Million Quiz Show?
I think maybe, but I think game shows are back. There were so many, and I think it was just sort of a no-brainer that Aaron and we did development with the BBC and started to explore would this be great to bring it back again. And I think, honestly, the timing of Hollywood Game Night, I think that one going away gave them a new place to put Jane Lynch. So we had her on a short list of hosts, the BBC and myself and Ryan O'Dowd from the BBC. And I was like, I know her. I'll just call and see if she wants to have breakfast. So we called her and we had breakfast with her. We didn't know that Hollywood Game Night was going away at that time. We had heard rumors that it was. But I think once Jane was part of the equation, I think it became a very easy thing for NBC to revive with Jane in it, because they still get to have Jane in a game show host role and yet also have that kind of retro move that was working for ABC.
Who were some of the other potential hosts for the Weakest Link revival?
RuPaul and Jeff Lewis. Ru was so busy and really the timing was terrible. Ru was on his way to England to start the new Drag Race. And Jane, the timing was perfect. And, now I look as like Jane Lynch was just perfect for this. It's like I can't even imagine anybody else in the role, almost the same way Anne was.
There are certainly some differences between the original primetime version and the revival, the biggest difference being the money ladders. The top prize is still $1 million, but the target amount for each round increases as the game goes along, from $25,000 in round 1 to $500,000 in round 6. And I actually think this is a great addition to the game. So Stuart, who came up with the idea of increasing the round's target as the game progresses? And did you have to convince the BBC to approve this change to the format?
You had to talk to the BBC for sure, but they're less precious about a format when you're bringing it back after it's been rested. They weren't purist about it. They were very open to it, but we had many discussions with them. It was Aaron. Aaron definitely felt like we should make that change, and we did that in development, and we tested it in development, and we did the run-throughs in development.
Although I really like the increased target element, just like the money ladder on the original American version, I felt like each of the new money ladders was just a conglomeration of standard American game show money ladder amounts, and each money ladder was not proportionally crafted for its specific round. So did somebody put in a lot of time and thought into creating each money ladder, or was it simply just a combination of ideas from different people on what the money ladder amount should be?
Aaron Solomon did, yes. I would say Aaron lost sleep over it. I was like, this makes sense. Good, let's do it. My job is easy when it comes to those things.
I'm sure the structure of each money ladder was tested multiple times before officially locking them in, correct?
Yes. Everything that you can test beforehand, you have to test beforehand, especially with the game show. So I do run through after run through after run through after run through, always.
Another difference is the inclusion of a button on each podium to be used when the contestant wants to bank money. On the revival, instead of just saying bank before the question is read, the contestant must say bank as well as push their button before Jane starts reading their question. Stuart, was there a specific reason why the button was included as part of the banking process for the contestants? And if a contestant hits their button but does not say bank, will the bank still count despite the contestant not doing both actions together?
That is a great question. I don't think it happened in any of our tapings that we did so far. I don't think it's happened. It seemed like we needed emotion to go with it because one of the things that used to happen in the old show, we want to correct things that used to happen in the show, especially since we had the leeway to go a little bit here. And so many of our stop times were, did they say bank? Did they not say bank? We didn't hear them say bank. So the money ladder never dropped. So then we have to rewind to the point where the person said bank, throw out this question, start with new questions. So it was a little bit tricky in that regard. So I think the idea was let's give them a physicalization with bank, and then we'll know when somebody said bank. It will actually physically trigger the money ladder to drop into the bank.
Oh, I see. So the pushing of the button actually triggers the money to be banked and the money ladder graphic to begin on the bottom level again.
Correct.
That's interesting. And as a viewer, another one of the new elements is that we get to see each question written out as a lower third on our television screen. However, the in-studio contestants don't get to see the questions in written form, correct?
Correct. They do get to see the picture questions, but not the written out questions. So a lot of times during rehearsal or when Jane's going through her material with the writers of the show, they make adjustments because hopefully we catch it long before Jane sees it. But hearing something isn't always as clear as seeing something. And from Jeopardy, you're seeing the question written out. So you can catch a nuance, you can catch a synonym, you can catch a clever rephrasing. that has to be audio only in our case. It really always has to make sense to the person so that they understand the question. So there are a lot of really clever questions that I think we throw out simply because when you say it, it actually doesn't make as much sense as when you see it spelled out.
Well, that leads to the main question I have regarding this element. I'm personally never a fan of when the at-home audience has a gameplay advantage over the actual contestants. So since we can see and read the questions while playing at home, why don't the in-studio contestants get the ability to physically see the questions written out as well?
We don't want people looking down and reading, honestly. I think that one of the great things about Weakest Link, and I've been out on that set and had to, in the old days, just played around or whatever, the shiny lights factor, the music, the turning, the asking of the question, the listening to the question, that's all on camera, all that FaceTime. And that's when you see somebody stammer or stutter or searching their brain. And I think we don't want to lose that eye contact at all, honestly. Even when we do a picture question, they're supposed to look down and look up real quick. So we don't like people getting lost in a screen and seeing the top of their head, essentially.
The most controversial difference between the original primetime version and the revival is the removal of the final money building round before the remaining two contestants go head to head. The second season of the George Gray syndicated version featured this format, but there's been a lot of backlash amongst game show fans because by eliminating the two-person chain round and going straight from 3 contestants to a 2-contestant head-to-head for all the money, strategically, the contestants are enticed to vote off the smartest player and go up against their weaker opponent during the head-to-head, which in turn defeats the whole purpose of the format and is honestly unfair. So why was the decision made to eliminate the final chain round?
This was debated way back in the original as well. The reason they had the money building round with the 2 contestants working together to get as much money as they can is I think the old days they felt that that was a way of keeping the stronger players in longer because there'd be an advantage to keeping the player in who was stronger so you could build more money. The problem I always felt with it too, and I'm on this team along with Aaron, I think believed it too, and I think we took a pretty strong stance in the redevelopment process and why we wanted to lose it, is England, they're into pub quizzes, they want to do the right thing. As a culture, I think they're just a little bit more ethical, and I think Americans are a little bit more competitive and kind of out for blood. And because of that, they get rid of the strong player if that strong player shows themselves to be such a strong player in such a clear way throughout. They'll get rid of them before that money building round anyway. So it was never really building a lot of money because they were thinking, well, I would rather go home with 25,000 than help somebody else win 70,000. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get your reasoning, but the whole point of the game is to eliminate the weakest link at the end of each round. And Jane still says it's time to vote off the weakest link going into the final vote. So I personally think being able to eliminate the strongest link just because you don't want to face them in the final round goes against the whole premise of the game. So were there ever any discussions of giving the strongest link in each round, or at least the strongest link in the last bank building round, immunity?
That comes up all the time too. I don't think that's completely off the table if we get future seasons, but I personally think that just like in Survivor, part of being the person to last to the end does not necessarily mean you won every challenge and you did the best. Again, if you will, to nod to the original premise, if you take a nod to the survival of the fittest element of things, sometimes those that survive are just the most savvy. They're not necessarily the smartest one in the room. And I think that makes this show very special, that you can actually not even do that well with your questions and actually still survive just by how you work others and how you vote. So I think giving people different paths to a win keeps the show fresh and interesting. This is not Jeopardy where you answered the best, so you get to come back tomorrow. It's just not what the show is. It's kind of the opposite of what the show is. So I like it the way it is. I'm not the one crying on the set when the strongest player gets voted off, but there's certainly people who get upset. They were so smart, they played so well. I'm like, yeah, but that's life. Isn't that what happens in life a lot of times too? So I kind of like that evil element in a weird way.
The last weakest link question I have for you, Stuart, is both Australia and England have brought back the weakest link and have used many of the changes that the rebooted American version implemented, including the look of the set, increased money ladders throughout the game, and a button on each contestant podium. So does it make you feel good that other countries decided to implement changes made to the American version as part of their reboots, especially England since they created the original format and the original look of the show?
Absolutely. I'm actually hired by the BBC when I do that show. I love working for the BBC. I have such a great long history with them. Anything as a producer collectively and it's not just me, Aaron, and the whole team. Anything that anybody can come up with that improves upon the existing wheel, doesn't reinvent it, but improves upon it, that is picked up elsewhere is a total compliment.
And before we get to the game, the last question I have for you, Stuart, is since all of the game shows we talked about today that you produced are originally from England, are there any game shows currently from England that you would like to bring to America and produce?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I actually really wanted to do the wheel, but another producer got that job. I'd say that was the one I was really interested because I wanted to revamp that a little bit. I had some ideas for it, but I just was not considered for that one. So I think I would have loved to have done the wheel, though, because I love the look and the feel of it so much. But I would have changed it if I could have.
I'm personally hoping 5 Gold Rings crosses the pond soon.
Oh, yeah, 5 Gold Rings. Good one, yeah. There are a lot of good shows. I did a Japanese game show here, too, Hole in the Wall. That was a completely different experience. But there are always good formats out there that I think could play well.
I agree, and hopefully we'll see them being produced here in America real soon. Well, Stuart, we have reached my favorite portion of the game show. And as a lifelong game show fan, I'm sure you're not one to turn down an opportunity to play a game. So are you ready to show off your game-playing skills right here on the game show?
Oh, God, of course. Go for it.
Excellent. It is time for the game of the day.
Game of the day.
Now, whenever I have a game show producer join me as a guest on the game show, I love to create and play a Bradley Clarke original version of a game show that they worked on during their career. And Stuart, that is exactly what I did for you. So get ready to stand behind a contestant podium as we play Weakest Link. Weakest Link. Welcome to a special Bradley Clarke original version of the Weakest Link.
Yay! Okay, I'm ready.
Now the rules. There are 3 rounds, and the goal of each individual round is to build a chain of 8 correct answers. Every time you answer a question correctly, you move up the chain. But just like on the show, an incorrect answer breaks the chain, and you have to start a brand new chain. However, if you say bank before the question is read, you will freeze your current position on the chain, and any incorrect answers during the round moving forward will only drop you down to that position. For example, if you answered 4 questions correctly in a row, and you say bank before the 5th question is read, you will freeze at position number 4 on the chain, and any incorrect answers moving forward will only drop you down to position 4, not drop you down to the bottom of the chain. But Stuart, use your bank power wisely, because between the 3 rounds, you only get to say bank a total of 5 times. The first round lasts for 3 minutes, the second round lasts for 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and the third round lasts for 2.5 minutes. All of the questions will be game show trivia questions, and Stuart, if you can win 2 out of the 3 rounds, you will be deemed the strongest link and win this game. Those are all the rules. Stuart, are you ready to show off all of the game show knowledge you have built up in your brain over the years?
I am.
Then, in the words of Ann Robinson, let's play The Weakest Link. So let's start with round 1, which lasts for 3 minutes. Remember, you have a total of 5 banks to use throughout the 3 rounds, and the goal is to build a chain of 8 correct answers. So are you ready to begin round 1?
Yes.
All right, Stuart, here we go. The first question is worth 1 step up the chain. Start the clock. Stuart, on Wheel of Fortune, what 25th letter of the alphabet, sometimes considered a vowel, qualifies as a consonant?
Why?
Correct. What mustached man was the final host of the 1990 to 1991 revival of To Tell the Truth?
Alex Trebek.
Correct. To her left or to her right, where did Charles Nelson Riley sit in relation to Brett Summers as a regular panelist on Match Game?
To her left.
Correct. Which original Saturday Night Live announcer was also the announcer on the original Jeopardy hosted by Art Fleming?
Don Pardo?
Correct. What currency symbol is featured on the Plinko chips on The Price is Right?
The $.
Correct.
Bang.
What time span of 100 years is featured in the title of a 1983 to 1989 Jim Perry-hosted game show?
Century.
Correct. The dating game featured one bachelor asking questions to how many bachelorettes?
3.
Correct. On Deal or No Deal, what is the lowest amount of money featured on a standard game board?
1 penny.
Correct! And that's a chain of 8 correct answers. You got it!
Yay!
That was incredible, Stuart. You went 8 for 8. 8 questions asked, 8 correct answers given. Despite you using one of your banks, you played a perfect round as you answered the first 8 questions correctly. And as a result of your perfectly completed chain, you have just won your first round, Stuart. Now let's move on to round 2, which lasts for 2 minutes and 45 seconds, which means 15 seconds are coming off the clock. Remember, Stuart, you still have 4 banks to use however you'd like, and you only need to win one of the next 2 rounds to be crowned the strongest link of the game show. So are you ready to play round 2?
Yep.
Very good. Let's play the weakest link. Start the clock. Stuart, Joker, Joker, Joker was the special kids version of what popular game show?
Joker's Wild.
Correct. Make Me Laugh was hosted from 1979 to 1980 by what late husband of Elaine Joyce?
Bobby Van?
Correct. The NBC version of The Singing Bee was hosted by which member of NSYNC?
Joey Fatone.
Correct. What first host of The Tonight Show hosted the 1972 revival of I've Got a Secret?
Jack Parr.
No, Steve Allen. Which of these was the name of a 1975 unsold game show pilot? Family Guy or King of the Hill?
King of the Hill.
Correct. Which popular game show panelist was known as the Poet Laureate of television?
Nipsey Russell.
Correct. Andrea's Art Mart and Heidi's Housewares were stores featured in the mall on what Pat Finn hosted game show?
Shop Till You Drop.
Correct. The game show Tic-Tac-Dough featured contestants playing as what 2 letters of the alphabet?
A and B.
No, X and O. The 2 teams competing against each other on standard episodes of Trivia Trap were labeled the Juniors and the what?
Seniors.
Correct. Who hosted Truth or Consequences for 19 years, as well as another popular game show for 35 years?
Oh my god, I can't think of his name. I can't remember his name. No answer.
Bob Barker. The classic concentration game board featured 2 red take spaces and 2 take spaces of what other Christmas color?
Green.
Correct. Which home improvement actor hosted Family Feud from 2002 until 2006?
Richard Karn.
Correct. What is the name of the talking stone head voiced by D. Bradley Baker on Legends of the Hidden Temple?
I don't know. No answer.
Olmec. Which daytime sidekick of Regis Philbin made her TV debut as the La La Girl on Name That Tune?
Kathy Lee Gifford.
Correct. Fox's Challenge of the Child Geniuses was the last game show hosted by what youthful game show legend?
Bob Eubanks.
No, Dick Clark. Which current Los Angeles Laker is an executive producer of The Wall?
LeBron James.
Correct. The classic game show channel Buzzer is missing which letter of the alphabet in its logo?
Z.
No, E. Mark L. Wahlberg hosted the 2008 to 2009 Fox game show titled The Moment of What?
Truth.
Correct. Time is up. And unfortunately, Stuart, unlike the first round, you did not complete a chain of 8 correct answers, which means you have failed round number 2.
That was a rough round.
Unfortunately, it was a bit of a rough round. A 3 correct answer chain was the longest chain you built in that round. But the good news is, Stuart, there is a round 3. Once again, if you complete the chain of 8 correct answers, you will win this game of Weakest Link and become this episode of the game show's Strongest Link. Also, keep in mind, you still have 4 banks to use. And since this is the final round, use your 4 banks as best as you can.
Got it.
15 seconds are coming off the clock again, which means this round lasts for 2.5 minutes. And for the final time today, let's play the weakest link. Start the clock. Stuart, the Money Cards is the bonus round segment of what classic game show?
Card Shark.
Correct. Survivor host Jeff Probst hosted 4 seasons of a Jeopardy spinoff for VH1 titled what?
Rock and Roll Jeopardy.
Correct. According to the title of a 2011 ABC game show, how many ways are there to leave a game show?
1,000.
No, 101 ways. Bill Anderson and Sarah Purcell hosted a 1977 to 1978 game show titled The Better What? Gender or Sex?
Sex.
Correct. Family Fortunes is the British version of what American game show?
Family Feud.
Correct. Sylvania was a frequent sponsor of what 1950s stunts-based game show hosted by Bud Collyer?
Beat the Clock.
Correct.
Bang.
Tony Randall and Jack Klugman appear on a spoof of Password on what 70s sitcom?
The Odd Couple.
Correct. Artie Johnson or Art James? Who hosted the 1977 to 1978 game show
Art
Knockout?
James.
No, Artie Johnson. The Price is Right pricing game, Hole in One, has contestants playing a version of what sport?
Golf.
Correct. When contestants signed in on What's My Line, they used what type of writing instrument often found in a classroom?
Chalk.
Correct. Which Mike and Molly star hosted the 2015 game show Monopoly Millionaires Club? Billy Gardell or Melissa McCarthy?
Billy Gardell.
Correct.
Bang.
Sponsored by Meow Mix, Chuck Woolery hosted a one-off game show titled Think Like a What Animal?
Cat.
Correct. Majude was the foreign game show featured on ABC's I Survived a what kind of game show?
Japanese.
Correct. That's a completed chain of 8 correct answers. Stuart, you won.
Yay. Okay, good. I have my pride still.
Yes, you do. So congratulations, Stuart. You are this episode of the game show's strongest link and have won this game of weakest link.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You are so very welcome. And that was the game of the day, weakest link. Weakest link. Well, Stuart, I have had so much fun chatting with you about some of the game shows that make up your incredible television resume. So thank you for joining me as a guest on the game show today.
I just loved it. You are truly everything you said you are. You really deliver. I am so impressed. And those questions were tough. Boy, I think I know game shows. Those were tough. And congratulations on all your success. And thank you so much for paying attention to one of the best genres that's out there.
Well, your words of support truly mean the world to me, Stuart. Thank you so much. And if you're ever looking for a host for one of your upcoming game show projects, I hope the name Bradley Clarke comes to mind.
I'm telling you, you'd be amazing. So yes, let's do that. I would love that. It would be an honor.
And Stuart, if you are ever looking for some new original game show ideas, I've got plenty of game show concepts that I've created that I would love to share with you someday.
I think we got to set up a pitch meeting for sure. You hit me up and we'll do it.
Perfect. I definitely will. And you always have an open invitation to join me again on the game show whenever you would like to talk more about your game show career with me.
Love it.
All right. Take care and keep in touch.
You got it. Thank you.
And Stuart, in the words of Ann Robinson, goodbye.
Bye.
And before I sign off, it's time for another Bradley Parody. Bradley Parody. This is the segment of the game show in which I create a parody song about an aspect of this episode. And believe it or not, throughout the entire history of the Bradley Parody, I have never created a parody song about a game show host. Yeah, I couldn't believe it either. So if you have been looking forward to hearing a game show host-inspired Bradley Parody, your wait is finally over. Now, although my guest Stuart Krasnow and I talked about a few hosts during our conversation, including Brooke Burns, Ricky Lake, and Jane Lynch, I had to make my Bradley parody about the woman who captivated America back in 2001, the one and only Ann Robinson. Now, can you guess what song I'm setting my Ann Robinson parody to? Keep in mind, her name is Ann Robinson, Mrs. Ann Robinson. Are you picking up the hint? I hope you did, because I'm about to tell you what the song is. To the tune of the classic Simon and Garfunkel song, Mrs. Robinson, from the movie The Graduate, here is Bradley parody number 23, titled Ann Robinson. She questions you, she's Ann Robinson. She expects the answer you should know. And if you don't, you'll get a look from Ann Robinson that shows her disappointment and dismay of your brain and how you play. When Ann asks you a question, you might feel like you're on trial. A wrong answer embarrasses yourself, and you have to stare into her intimidating eyes, knowing that wrong answer just might send you home. She will scare you, she's Ann Robinson. She's known as the world's most fearful host of a game show. And if you mess with Ann Robinson, she knows exactly the words to say. It ruins your day, you're not okay. The easier questions are the ones that are difficult. And serious look glares at your blank gaze. All of a sudden there's a slight chill in the air as you realize this question's not gonna make you win. She will tease you, she's Ann Robinson. If your team does not get 8 in a row and bank the dough, she'll pick on you, she's Ann Robinson. A sly remark is gonna come your way if you play bad today. When you get a question you don't know the answer to, don't just stand there with a confused face. If you waste a lot of time and your mouth does not move, there is a very good chance that you're gonna lose. The weakest link, that's who has to go. Just hope the weakest link this round's not you. And if you do, hear the dreaded phrase from Ann Robinson. It means that you're about to leave the game with no fame, only shame. If you go on weakest link, you are most likely to get voted off and hear and say goodbye to you. And I hope you think I am the strongest link when it comes to creating game show parody songs, and I should not say goodbye to the Bradley parody segment. And that was this episode's Bradley Parody. Bradley Parody. Well, unfortunately, time is up, and I have to complete the closing because we have reached the end of this episode of The Game Show. My thanks once again to Game Show producer Stuart Krasnow for being my guest today. Now, if you are a super fan of The Game Show, you know I love interviewing game show producers. And I have been very fortunate to have a number of game show producing greats join me as a special guest, including Bob Bowden, Barry Posnick, Roger Dobkowitz, Graham Shaw and Chris Ahern, Jack Martin, John Ritchie Jr., Jason Antonevich, and the man who helped me connect with Stuart Krasnow, Aaron Solomon. So if you would like to listen to all of these stellar episodes featuring the amazing producers I just mentioned, or if you want to listen to this episode again featuring the sensational Stuart Krasnow, all you have to do is log on to www.soundcloud.com/Bradley_Clarke. That's BRADLEY_CLARKE/sets/The Game Show. That's www.soundcloud.com/Bradley_Clarke. That's BRADLEY_CLARKE/sets/The Game Show. In addition, The Game Show is on YouTube. That's right, you can also listen to every single episode, game segment, Bradley parody, and more by going onto the YouTube channel of The Game Show starring Bradley Clarke. And if you're a loyal friend and true, please remember to like and subscribe. But that's not all. The Game Show can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify for Podcasters, formerly known as Anchor. Yes, every guest I've interviewed, game I've created, and Bradley parody I've sung can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify for Podcasters, formerly known as Anchor, by searching for The Game Show starring Bradley Clarke. And no matter if you're a new fan or a super fan, don't forget to hit that follow button. Plus, don't forget to like The Game Show starring Bradley Clarke on Facebook and follow The Game Show starring Bradley Clarke on Twitter using the handle @TheGameShowBC and hashtag #TheGameShow. And of course, be sure to tune in next time for another exciting episode of The Talk Show, all about the world of television game and competition shows, The Game Show. I'm Bradley Clarke, the Bradster, and there's really only one way that I could end this episode, am I right? You are the weakest link. Goodbye. Actually, Am probably does it better, so let me hand off the final line to the weakest link OG.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
Bye for now.
This edition of The Game Show was created and produced by Bradley Clarke. This is Austin Angelo speaking.
The Game Show is a Bradley Clarke production. Get your game on.